What you see behind me is the world's strictest and largest prison. This mega prison has a capacity of 40,000. Prisoners here are the most unsafe people you can even imagine. How many people's lives have you ended? Is it 5 or 10? How many?
More than 50.
The Salvadoran government's message is clear. Crime is no longer tolerated and the punishment is severe.
El Salvador once had the highest rate of lives lost due to widespread chaos. During its peak, 104 out of every 100,000 people lost their lives in a single year. Because of the no-contact policy, their families have no idea where they are or if they are still alive. For some, this documentary could be their first chance to see a missing loved one. Before entering the modules where the inmates are, we visit the armory of the prison.
This is the world's largest and most brutal prison, CECOT, a supermax fortress built to house the worst of the worst. Gang members, murderers, and criminals deemed beyond redemption are locked away here, stripped of all rights, never to see the light of day again. The images from inside these walls have shocked the world, showing thousands of inmates crammed together, living in conditions designed to break them. But for El Salvador's government, this is justice. Now, the US President Donald Trump wants in on the action. During his 2024 campaigns, he pointed to El Salvador's iron-fisted crackdown as a model for America. Could a prison like this be coming to the US? And what does it reveal about the future of crime and punishment? Let's take a deep dive into the dark reality of CECOT and why Trump wants in on the action.
MS-13 and many other gangs. These are animals. These aren't people. They're psychopaths, sociopaths, the kind of people we have here.
We are about to see the worst of the worst.
Welcome to CECOT, the world's largest prison by capacity in El Salvador.
It's called CECOT, the Center for Confinement and Terrorism. The worst of the worst end up here. And we're about to pay a visit to this place.
Decades before El Salvador declared war on crime, the country was drowning in violence, poverty, and corruption. The roots of the crisis can be traced back to El Salvador's civil war, which went on from 1979 to 1992, 2+ decades of brutal conflict that left 75,000 people dead. As the war tore the country apart, tens of thousands of Salvadorans fled to the United States to seek shelter, and many of them ended up settling in Los Angeles, California. But life in LA was ruthless, brutal, and not at all what they were used to back home. Although their country was ravaged by war and violence, it was still their country, and at least there, they could be treated with respect and dignity. But in LA, things were completely different. The Salvadorians weren't treated like equal citizens. They were discriminated against. Eventually, the discrimination, poverty, and a lack of opportunities pushed many young Salvadorans into gang life. This is how MS-13 and Barrio 18, the two deadliest gangs in the world, were born. By the 1990s, gang violence in Los Angeles was spiraling out of control, and in response, the US government cracked down, deporting thousands of Salvadoran criminals back to El Salvador. But instead of escaping their past, these criminals brought the violence with them. In a country still recovering from war, the Salvadoran government was powerless to stop the gangs. MS-13 and Barrio 18 spread like wildfire, taking over entire neighborhoods. By the early 2000s, gang members controlled entire towns. They established their power and dominance, forcing businesses to pay extortion money in the name of protection or be killed. The citizens, who were already struggling post-war, couldn't stand up to the gangs. They began to live in fear, caught between two warring factions. By 2015, El Salvador had the highest murder rate in the world, 104 homicides per 100,000 people. For years, the Salvadoran government tried and failed to control the chaos. A few presidents tried different tactics. Some presidents negotiated with gangs, offering money in exchange for peace. Others launched military operations, but these only led to more violence. Nothing worked until Bukele came to power. In March 2022, El Salvador experienced one of the bloodiest months in the country's history. A wave of mass murders swept through El Salvador, leading to the massacre of 62 people in a single day. Salvadoran President Bukele declared open war on the country's criminal gangs. President Bukele and his allies quickly established a state of emergency that allowed law enforcement agencies and courts to bypass due process guarantees, and other constitutional protections. This left the people of El Salvador effectively without any constitutional protection. But the people of El Salvador were not the president's target. He set his sights on the gangs that were trying to run his country to the ground. The legislature, where Bukele controls a supermajority, instituted harsh new sentencing guidelines for gang-related crimes, lowered the age of criminal responsibility from 16 to 12, and introduced a gag rule banning journalists from spreading gang messages. Over the next 16 months, more than 70,000 suspected criminals, 2% of El Salvador's adult population, were thrown into prison.
Once dominating the country, these gangs faced a dramatic crackdown starting in March 2022. Under President Nayib Bukele's administration, over 70,000 individuals, about 2% of the country's adult population, were arrested within just 16 months. Buses transported thousands of chained gang members to CECOT in a tightly coordinated nighttime operation.
The message was clear.
The Salvadoran government's message is clear. Crime is no longer tolerated and the punishment is severe.
El Salvador once had the highest rate of lives lost due to widespread chaos. During its peak, 104 out of every 100,000 people lost their lives in a single year.
El Salvador's justice minister had this to say: "They messed with the wrong government and president. No pity, no mercy." The Salvadoran government had a plan to achieve El Salvador free of gangs. They increased jail sentences for gang membership and eliminated the possibility of house arrest for detainees belonging to terrorist groups. Gangs were designated as terrorist organizations under Salvadoran law. The government also lowered the age to 12, for which people can be tried for gang-related crimes. But that wasn't all the Salvadoran government did. They also reformed existing anti-gang laws so they can apply them to a broader range of targets. The Legislative Assembly modified the law regarding agrupaciones ilícitas, unlawful association, expanding its meaning to include anyone who promotes, helps, facilitates, or favors the activities of a criminal organization. In effect, the law, which was already broad in scope, now gives authorities the power to arrest not just suspected members or homeboys, but also aspiring members, chiqueos, and suspected collaborators. They are not to go out even to the patio of prisons, President Bukele said to the gangs, adding, "A message to the gangs: because of your actions, now your homeboys will not see even one ray of sunlight."
For El Salvador's justice minister, that is just about right.
Se metieron con el gobierno y con el presidente equivocado.
That's it. No pity.
No mercy for them.
We must remind the people of El Salvador that what is happening now is due to the negligence of those who protected criminals, the conservative Arena Party said in a statement, and all of the policy reforms worked. In a few short months, El Salvador went from the world's most dangerous country to one of the safest in Latin America, almost overnight. For instance, in 2015, they had 104 homicides per 100,000 people, but by 2023, they only had 2.4 homicides per 100,000 people. For the first time in decades, Salvadorans felt safe walking the streets, but human rights organizations sound the alarm. Tens of thousands were arrested without trial. Families had no way to contact their loved ones. But despite the criticism, Bukele's popularity skyrocketed because, for the first time in history, Salvadorians could walk the streets without fear.
Unbelievable conditions. You don't cry a tear for them at all.
No, imagine the brutality when they treat our society. They don't deserve any type of poor people. No, they are not poor people.
But he also had a big problem with the arrests of thousands of gang members. El Salvador's prison system was overflowing. Bukele knew he needed a new strategy, and with that, he announced his next move: the world's most extreme prison, CECOT.
Supermaxi Jail, billed as the world's toughest prison, holds up to 40,000 inmates in the most brutal conditions imaginable.
CECOT, the terrorism confinement center, is unlike any other prison on Earth, a fortress designed to break the toughest and the most brutal gang members.
Built in 2022, this massive prison is made up of 8 separate modules spread over 410 acres of land. Each pair of modules is enclosed by 2 separate 3-meter-high walls with razor wire.
Opened in 2022, this high-tech supermax facility is designed to hold 40,000 prisoners and keep them there for life.
All these blokes are members of one of either 2 gangs, MS-13 or Barrio 18. And for that privilege, they are facing a sentence of 60 years inside these walls. You guys all gang members?
Yeah, all gang members.
I get the set.
Okay.
CECOT is a fortress built on 410 acres of land with 8 separate modules surrounded by a 9-meter-high wall with a 3-meter electric fence.
The entire facility is surrounded by a towering 9-meter-high wall with a 3-meter-high electric fence carrying 15,000 volts. 19 watchtowers are ensuring nothing escapes notice.
It has 19 watchtowers, over 600 heavily armed guards with state-of-the-art mobile phone jammers to cut off all communication.
And the entire area has state-of-the-art mobile phone blocking technology. The sheer scale and hopelessness of this place is staggering.
Essentially, from the moment a person enters CECOT, they are guaranteed to never be seen again. It's the place where gang members go to disappear.
They are killer and has to be treated as a killer, as a terrorist. To be part of MS or 18th Street, you have to kill someone.
That's the initiation, isn't it?
This is the initiation.
Inside, conditions are beyond brutal. For those prisoners, life inside CECOT is hell. One cell holds up to 150 prisoners, packed like sardines. There are no beds, no pillows, just steel bunks stacked 4 levels high.
Imagine how long you would last in these conditions. There's no sheets, no mattresses. They sleep on cold steel frames.
The lights stay on 24 hours a day, which means the prisoners have no sense of time. Night, morning, and noontime all look the same to them. There is no night, which means no rest, literally, for the wicked.
There's just 2 open toilets in each of these massive cells. And the lights stay on 24/7. But how many here might be innocent?
There are only 2 open toilets per cell, which means only 2 toilets for 150 men. They are also only entitled to 1 meal a day: rice, pasta, tortillas. They don't get any meat and barely have any protein in their diets.
And they eat the same meal every single day. Utensils are banned, so they use their hands.
If an inmate breaks the rules, they are sent to solitary confinement, which is a pitch-black cell with no bed, no light, and no human contact, no way to track time. But probably the worst rule in CECOT is the no-contact rule. This means prisoners are not allowed to contact anyone in the outside world, no lawyers, friends, or even family.
Once they become a permanent part of CECOT, the inmates lose all contact with loved ones for the rest of their lives, as family visits are strictly forbidden. It's also important to note that a small number of innocent people were mistakenly imprisoned during the big crackdown. Because of the no-contact policy, their families have no idea where they are or if they are still alive. For some, this documentary could be their first chance to see a missing loved one. Before entering the modules where the inmates are, we visit the armory of the prison.
No matter how tough a criminal is, the kind of isolation in CECOT breaks them.
So tough laws for tough crimes.
That's right.
Well, Minister, no one could accuse you of being too soft.
According to the Salvadoran government, these gang members are considered serial killers.
MS-13 started in Los Angeles, in the US. But as the organization grew, they became satanic. They started doing satanic rituals. I don't know exactly when that started, but it was well documented.
Yes.
And so they became a satanic organization. And even when you, sometimes when you interview gang members that are in prison, they would say, I'm out of the gang. And the guy that, they asked him, how many people have you killed? And he said, I don't remember. Yeah. He didn't remember how many.
In the eyes of the government, these men are beyond help. And despite an outcry from human rights organizations around the world, nothing is about to change anytime soon. And any form of rehabilitation, well, that's well and truly off the table.
We don't believe in rehabilitation for them.
And until science can reset their minds, they don't plan to offer them rehabilitation.
They are a serial killer, and until now, the science can discover some treatment to reset this type of mind. Until the science can be discovered something, we don't think or we don't apply any type of rehabilitation.
Some call it justice, others call it torture.
Well, that's next level. I mean, the conditions in there are like something you've never seen. The infrastructure's great, it's all shiny and new, but those cells, the number of people in it, I mean, depending on which side of the argument you fall on, it's either the ultimate deterrent or it's an abuse of human rights. And if that doesn't stop you from being a gang member, nothing will.
For months, journalists begged for access to CECOT. The Salvadoran government had kept the facility under tight security, refusing entry to international human rights organizations and foreign media. But after intense negotiations, one foreign TV crew was finally granted access, making history as the first outsiders to step inside the world's largest supermax prison. Their mission? To witness firsthand what life inside CECOT really looks like, to see if the world's most brutal prison was a model for success or a human rights catastrophe. What they saw shocked them to their core. The journey to CECOT itself was a spectacle of power. The prison is located in a remote area surrounded by miles of barren land, deliberately isolated, ensuring no one escapes and no one sneaks in. Approaching the compound, the TV crew passed through multiple heavily guarded checkpoints. Soldiers with assault rifles inspected every vehicle.
The soldiers stopped us. We're hoping this will be the last checkpoint. The jammers blocked all signals within a 2-kilometer radius of CECOT, completely cutting off all communication. Over 600 soldiers work only to secure the perimeter.
The crew was instructed to leave all personal belongings at the entrance: wallets, phones, jewelry. The only thing they were allowed to bring in were their cameras and microphones. Even wedding rings had to be removed. Before stepping inside, they were subjected to full-body scans, passing through high-tech X-ray machines capable of detecting even the smallest contraband, down to bones and internal organs.
Well, that needs to be put away over there.
This high-capacity X-ray scanner even shows bones and internal organs. It's mainly used to scan newcomers, ensuring no one tries to sneak in anything forbidden on their body before entering.
The reason for the strict rules is because they are dealing with the worst of the worst. People who function at the level of brutality are often very creative about escaping their bounds. In the past, the CECOT inmates have tried smuggling in microchips, SD cards, and even weapons inside their bodies.
The inmates used to swallow some objects, or they would try to bring them in vaginally or anally. Micro SD memory cards, microchips, and not only that, even phone charges.
Another thorough body search has been conducted.
Once cleared, they were escorted by armed guards who wore balaclavas to protect their identities. This is to protect not just the gangs, but their families. If the gang members recognize them, they'll target their families. Finally, after an hour of intense security screening, they were granted access to the prison. What they saw next would stay with them forever.
Prisoners do not have any ventilation rights or courtyards to walk outside their cell.
Each inmate here have been given one of the longest sentences you can even imagine in your life. This is so intense.
Their eyes are all on me, following my every step.
Getting an eye contact with them. There are so many of them. I'm speechless.
The air was thick, the smell of sweat and metal overwhelming. Through the massive steel doors, they were led into a massive chamber where thousands of tattoo-covered inmates stood, heads shaved, bodies packed together like livestock. Every single pair of eyes in the room locked onto the crew, intense, hollow, soulless. It was like stepping into a den of wild animals. The silence was deafening. Their cameras rolled as they took in the sight. Thousands of prisoners wearing identical white uniforms, barefoot, expressionless, no furniture, no personal belongings, just steel bunk beds stacked 4 levels high.
Each prisoner receives just the bare essentials: a white sheet, a uniform, socks, slippers, and a towel. That's it.
The prisoners spend their entire days on their 4-level bunk beds. They have stacked tightly, like items stored in a warehouse.
2 open toilets at the far end of the room, no privacy, just a shared space for all. A single barrel of water used for drinking, bathing, and cleaning, rationed carefully. One of the journalists who went there recalled being inside some of the worst prisons in the world, yet none of them compared to the brutality of CECOT. CECOT has a reputation they are very proud of. They've managed to get rid of their gang problem in a short time. Many countries praised how President Bukele handled the problem, including President Donald Trump. This is where Donald Trump enters the picture. picture. As he campaigned for the 2024 election, Trump repeatedly praised El Salvador's crime crackdown. He hinted at bringing a CECOT-style prison to America. Basically, mass arrests, supermax prisons for violent criminals and undocumented immigrants, zero tolerance for crime. Bukele was very proud that his efforts at cleaning up his country were gaining international attention, and he jumped on it quickly, meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. What appeared to be a standard, albeit very friendly, diplomatic meeting between Nayib Bukele and the Secretary of State took an unusual turn when the Salvadoran president made an unprecedented offer to the U.S. He told Rubio that El Salvador would be willing to accept deportee criminals of any nationality, U.S. citizens included, into CECOT, the nation's biggest industrial-sized prison built specifically to house gang members.
The president, in an act of extraordinary friendship to our country, knowing the challenges we face in the U.S., has agreed to the most unprecedented and extraordinary migratory agreement anywhere in the world. First, obviously, he continues with full cooperation on the returning of Salvadorians who find themselves illegally in the United States and welcome them back home. And that's already existing, and that will continue. But second, he has agreed to accept for deportation any illegal alien in the United States who is a criminal from any nationality, be they MS-13 or Tren de Aragua, and house them in his jails. And third, he has offered to house in his jails dangerous American criminals in custody in our country, including those of U.S. citizenship and legal residence. No country's ever made an offer of friendship such as this.
And the U.S. is in talks to take him up on his offer. The Trump administration said it was in talks with El Salvador to revive an agreement that could allow the United States to send non-Salvadoran migrants to El Salvador. This time, though, the government would also aim to send members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua to Salvadoran prisons, said Mauricio Claver Carone, the State Department's special envoy for Latin America, in a call with media outlets.
That you can think about it, any unlawful immigrant, illegal immigrant in the United States who's a dangerous criminal, MS-13, Tren de Aragua, whatever it may be, he has offered his jails so we can send him here and he will put him in his jails. And he's also offered to do the same for dangerous criminals currently in custody and serving their sentences in the United States.
And Trump supporters are all for it, saying, if it worked for El Salvador, why not America? One thing is clear, CECOT is the most extreme prison on earth. It represents a new era of crime control, one where human rights take a back seat to security. And now, Trump is watching. Is CECOT a necessary evil, or is it a terrifying step toward a police state? For now, the answer remains unclear. But one thing is certain, the world is watching. What do you think? Is Trump's approach to gangs going to finally free America from its clutches? Or could it make things even worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that matter. Catch you soon. Stay safe.